I want to thank the chair. I want to thank all of you for being here, and No Labels for really elevating the discussion at a national level on how we can solve problems together. And of course, it's great to see Governor Huntsman and Senator Lieberman, two great leaders who have done so much in the public arena, and of course, two great business leaders here, Mr. Tisch and Ms. Hogan. So I'm honored to be here with all of you. And I wanted to follow up. I saw in your written testimony, Senator Lieberman, that you had said getting big things done in Washington has never been easy, of course, but not long ago, it was at least possible. And you cited the example, of course, the work that you did on the Clean Air Act. So what has changed, and how do we bring it back so that we can work together to solve some of these big problems for the country? Because I think I can speak for many of my colleagues. We come here to do that, right, and we want to find ways to get things done for the American people.
Thanks, Senator Ayotte, and thanks for your leadership and always eagerness to work across party lines to get things done. So the reason I said getting big things done in Washington has never been easy is because we're, a big, diverse, sometimes raucous democracy. Now about 320 million people, all represented here, and bringing very different perspectives. So to get anything done, you really do have to go through the process that we're describing, and often either events, awful events like 9/11, forced Congress to set goals, work together, negotiate, compromise to make things better, or sometimes, other kinds of events. We always talk about President Reagan and Tip O'Neill. In that case, they were not quite at the precipice, about to fall over, but they were getting close to the edge, and they were both public-spirited enough to figure out how to compromise to save, in that case, the Social Security system. In some ways, now the divisive forces. I mean, what you just said, Senator Ayotte, is so true, and I think about this a lot and say it now that I'm looking back at these 24 years I was privileged to be here. The reality is that the people I met as colleagues are, by and large, very public-spirited. I mean, you didn't spend all that time doing a lot of things that are not pleasant, like raising money to get elected to office, to come here and, be part of gridlock. Almost everybody I knew came here to try to get something done for their district, their state, their country. And there are forces at work that now pull us apart. In some sense, this national strategic agenda, the goal setting, is an attempt to go back to something that happened intuitively around here, often at big moments, and to force it by this process. In some ways, like, somebody once said to me back in law school that if we were all perfect, we wouldn't need law because, or to be more vivid, somebody said, in heaven there is no law because you don't need it, everybody behaves. In hell, it's only law, and we're here on earth in between, and therefore we need the law to try to bring us to our best behavior and express at least our aspirations. Well, in a way, that's what this agenda is about. Through the national strategic agenda, to build support in Congress, to go out in the political process to try to get the presidential candidates to commit to it, so that something different happens in January of 2017, which is that the new president, whoever it is, knows that he or she has a bunch of people in Congress committed to this process, and they implement it, and in fact, we get something done.
Well, I really appreciate what you're doing with this national strategic agenda, and we're looking forward to having you in New Hampshire. And I think that you're right. Something has to change. We all have to be focused, and I hope that this election provides us with an opportunity. And one thing that I think as well is in this national strategic agenda that we look at compromise as a positive attribute for our leaders, that we understand that as a nation, we wouldn't have been formed. And the great compromises that form this nation are ones that are so important as we look at some of these big challenges, the fiscal state of the country, the economy. And I hope that when this dialogue goes forward, that's something that we can spend some time on, that's something that we think is positive in our leaders here. And something that you said, Governor Huntsman, I wanted to touch upon, and that's our education system. You said that more financial literacy. I would fully agree with you on that, and I think it would be great to have that be part of this national discussion. I also believe civic literacy in terms of, we talk about history in the schools, but really engaging it on a much more direct civic level, I think would be helpful as well as we go forward. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Senator Ayotte. We have to have the next generation as full participants in this democracy. Now, I'm raising 7 kids, so I have a pretty good sense of what the millennials think about.
I would say so.
What's on their mind, and they're drifting and peeling off of their political system, generally speaking, because they're losing trust and faith in the direction of the country. And I would argue part of it is they feel detached, a lot of, money and everything else, that their vote doesn't matter anymore. But I also think it's been a while since they saw any points on the board. So we grew up, and our generation saw the end of World War II. We saw space. We saw the end of the Human Genome Project, one of the most important scientific goals set by both sides in generations. We saw the end of the Cold War. All points on the board, and I would argue that for my kids, and we have this discussion a lot, where are the points on the board? Where have I last seen an R and a D sitting together at the same table, focused on the same goal, and articulating why it is an American goal, not a party goal, but an American goal? And until we see this kind of thing, where we have strategy as opposed to tactics, then until we get to that point, our civics lessons are just not going to loom large in the minds of our young people. You want those civics lessons delivered by passionate, committed teachers, which we have all across this country, but you want them to fall onto students who say, I believe in my system, I want to get involved in my system, and I want to give back. And what I'm learning in the classroom now is translatable into my citizenship. Right now, there's the disconnect, and we have to figure out how we reinvigorate this democracy, particularly for the next generation.
Thank you all. I know my time has expired, but let me just say to Mr. Tisch and Ms. Hogan, I'm so glad to see the private sector engaged in this because often the private sector may be engaged on a transactional basis on a particular one issue that impacts their business in this regard or one regulation, but to see that you're stepping back and looking at the big picture of how we can improve everything that will have a rising tide for everyone, I think is terrific. So I thank you all for being here.
I think you would find that there's great depth of feeling in the business sector for the success of Washington. This has been a relationship that has gone back centuries, and the stronger that Washington is, the stronger the business is, and vice versa. And it's a relationship that when we work together, we do best.
Excellent. Thank you all.